Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of College Hockey Talk. On today's podcast, I'm joined by Kassidy Sauvé. She is a former Ohio State and Clarkson women's hockey player, and she is currently with the Buffalo Beauts in the PHF. Cassidy has been to two Frozen Fours, and a lot has happened in her college hockey career, so I'm looking forward to talking to her about that. But Cassidy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and how's everything going?
Very good, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Now, obviously, there's so much I want to get into regarding your career, so I thought it would just be best to start off from the beginning and work all the way up to where you are today. So it says that you're from Whitby, Ontario. Talk about growing up there and how'd you start playing hockey?
When I was younger, probably around 4 or 5, for Christmas, my parents got my brother hockey skates and me figure skates. Um, and immediately I was like, no, I want the same ones as my brother, Brady. So I ended up, they returned them and got me hockey skates, and I started getting out on the outdoor rink with him and kind of just putzing around. And then eventually, we started actually playing together on a team. And I think for me, the big thing was having an opportunity to do things with my big brother. So that's kind of how hockey started for me. And then it kind of just kept going. And eventually I transitioned to being a goalie at a pretty young age. So
Yeah, what led you to become a goalie? Because for most people, they don't like getting pucks thrown at them. So, what led you to sort of go transition to that position?
I actually blame my brother for that one too. He needed a target to work on his slap shot. And I was, I guess, crazy enough to go stand in the net and let him shoot on me. So eventually I just turned to my parents and I was like, I think I want to be a goalie. And at that point in time, I was on a team where like everyone gets an opportunity to play goalie. But I ended up not really letting any of the other kids go in. And I just always wanted to be a net, and no one else really wanted to do it. So I kind of was like just a good opportunity for me to get in there and do something I actually wanted to do. So
And obviously, Cassie, I'm the youngest sibling as well, so I totally understand being forced to do stuff you don't like, and being goalie is one of those things. So I completely understand that.
yeah.
Now, who was your favorite player growing up? Was it someone on the Leafs? Was it a goalie? Was it a woman on the national team? Like, who was someone you inspired to be like?
Yeah, when I was younger, and I guess we mostly watched NHL hockey. Ed Belfour was my favorite goalie, especially when he played for the Leafs. And then, kind of as I got a little bit more exposure to women's hockey, I started watching the national team, and I ended up really liking Charlene Labonte, and that's actually why I still wear number 32 to this day. So it's kind of cool that I, at a young age and in a time where women's hockey wasn't as prevalent, that I ended up, getting that opportunity to watch her and learn from her. And I actually got to work with her quite a bit, which was pretty cool too.
Does she know that you were her favorite player growing up?
Yeah, yeah, she does.
What was her reaction when you told her that?
I think it's anytime someone tells you that you're their favorite player, I think it's humbling for sure. And she is such a great person that she loves that. And we chat here and there about, number 32. She'll be like, keep going number 32 and stuff like that. And it's kind of been adopted by me to wear that number, and hopefully one day have as much success as she's had. So
Now, before you went off to college, you played in the PWHL for the Whitby Wolves and the Durham West Junior Lightning. How'd you get the opportunity to go to the PWHL, and how do you compare your experiences between the teams that you played for in Whitby and Durham?
yeah, so when I was in I think grade 10, I was still playing boys hockey. I think that's a sophomore for any American people listening. But yeah, so when I was in grade 10, I was still playing boys hockey, and I was kind of getting to that age where I knew that if I didn't switch to the women's game, I was probably going to have a hard time in college adjusting to the differences in the game. So I reached out to a couple of PWHL teams, and not knowing the process of like how early people commit to those teams. There wasn't a whole lot left open, but Durham West kind of welcomed me with open arms, and it was pretty close to home for me. So it was kind of nice to be able to play for like a hometown team. So I played for them for a year, and then it was really good. I made a lot of great friends, and it was a great opportunity to adjust to the game. And then in my senior year, I switched to Whitby so that I could actually play for my hometown. And it was one of the best years of hockey that I've ever had. It was very memorable and probably one of the most fun experiences I had. And at first, I was a little bit nervous, I think, to play girls hockey because it's definitely a different environment. But that was like a really great group that kind of got me ready for college.
And obviously, talking to a lot of women's hockey players, and when I've done this podcast, a lot of them did play boys hockey before transitioning to girls hockey. But I feel like the transition must be a little bit easier as a goalie since, there's for as a player, you have to adjust not having to hit anybody and all that stuff. So what was like some of the things you had to adjust to as a goalie going from boys hockey to girls hockey?
Yeah, I think the big thing that was hard for me when I switched over was the speed of like the game itself. I even when I still skate with guys in the summer, and I feel like for the first couple weeks when I'm back with skating with girls again, I feel like I'm like moving too fast and need to chill out. And I think at that time it was the same thing. I just had never done it before, so I didn't know how to process it. So it was like I was actually my first year in girls hockey. If you watched me, you would have been like, wow, she's terrible. Like I got burned so many times because I would like they'd pass it over and I would slide and then they would just pass it back and the net would be wide open. Because I do think girls have a tendency to I mean, they're not getting cranked with a hit, so they have the tendency to have more time to make a secondary decision or something like that. So I definitely had to kind of calm my game down, and it was actually a harder adjustment than I thought it was going to be.
And overall, when you were with the PWHL, how did it help prepare you for college hockey with Ohio State?
We get a lot of volume. That's one thing that I think is incredibly fortunate for kids growing up in Ontario and having, especially female hockey players, having an opportunity to play in the PWHL is there's a lot of volume. You're in tournaments and games, and I think having that opportunity to play at a high level against the top players in Ontario, it prepares you to go to college, whether that's in Canada or the US, and have success because you're just kind of bred into it.
Now, what's your best memory you have with the PWHL when you think back to it today?
Uh, Thinking back on it, I would probably say my final year with the Whitby Wolves. We had like such a dominant year. I think we won almost every tournament we went to, and we won the final four. Like we just had so much success. And at that time, I was with Team Ontario and Team Canada too, and we won gold with both of those teams as well. So I think just that whole year in general, like before going to college, it was such a confidence boost to have so much success.
Now, talk about your recruitment process to Ohio State. Why did you end up going there versus other schools you might have looked at? Because I think people tend to forget when you went to Ohio State, it's not what it was like today, like as a powerhouse school.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty remarkable today. When I was playing boys hockey my last year, there was an Ohio State scout in the stands. And my guy teammates came out to me and said, that guy's here for you. And I was like, no, he's not. Like, I don't even know what that is. And, and then when I was in grade 11, sure enough, they were at my games again. And then I committed like halfway through grade 11, but they were always keeping an eye on me, which was pretty cool. Like there was a lot of teams that did that. But Ohio State from day one was so dedicated to the process that I just like felt like they actually wanted me. And when I had conversations with the head coach at that time, he had a plan, and I kind of liked just how organized he was with what he wanted out of the team. And I think a lot of the success that the team has today is the players he started to bring in kind of when I got recruited, like Jim C. Dunn and Emma Malte, like those were his commits at the time. So I think he just started to get those players that were very highly skilled. And I wanted to be a part of growing a culture and not just being a part of one that was already had tons of success. So
Now, speaking of adjustments, what was like the biggest adjustment you had to make to college hockey as a freshman? And what's like the difference between juniors and college? Obviously, the speed of the game is much faster, but I'm assuming like since players are making quicker decisions, you have to like react quicker than you normally do in juniors.
yeah, it was honestly like I think maybe not my first weekend, but maybe my second weekend we played against Wisconsin. Um, And it's just like it was honestly jaw-dropping to see how much skill there was, and it was exciting at the same time. Like, obviously, you're young and you're taking it all in, but just to see how amazing, the game has become, it's really exciting, and there's definitely a lot to take in when you're a freshman. It almost feels like a blur thinking about it now, but, just, like, it's really cool to see how strong the competition is, and I feel like even now when you look at, like, the the stats and stuff, like different teams are winning and different teams are beating each other on any given night. So it's kind of anyone's game now.
Oh yeah, especially in the WCHA because
Yeah,
like it used to just be in Wisconsin and Minnesota, but now it's Minnesota Duluth, obviously
yeah,
Ohio State, and then you see St. Cloud State, a team on the rise. So it's definitely good to see like how there's different teams sort of competing
yeah,
for a championship at the end of the season. I think it makes it more interesting, and it
yeah,
also shows the
definitely,
growth of women's hockey as well.
for sure.
Now, obviously, freshman year, you lost to North Dakota in the playoffs. I'm curious what you took away from your first playoff experience in the WCHA and how you used it for the rest of your time with Ohio State.
Yeah, I remember like losing to North Dakota like it was yesterday. For whatever reason, I feel like that has stuck with me. I think at that point, maybe not a lot of people knew, but I was playing through, I had torn labrums in my hips. So it was just frustrating because I felt like I tried to give it my all and be there for the team and perform as best as I could. But I feel like I was so limited. But I do remember those games like they were yesterday. Like we played well and we weren't necessarily as skilled as them, but we battled hard. And I think that kind of was the pivoting point of our program where people were like, we're not just doing this for fun. We can actually have success if we work like this all the time.
And obviously, your sophomore year, you didn't play due to an injury. I assume it's because of the torn labrum that you had. So how did
Yeah.
you handle that challenge of not playing that season, and what's the recovery process like for a torn labrum?
It was definitely tough. Mentally sometimes when, you're around the team but you're not on the ice with them and you kind of just feel like a bit of an outsider, and my teammates were really great at kind of keeping me involved and including me and stuff, but at the end of the day when you're not on the ice with your team it's very different. But I do think that that was one year where I got to grow the most. I it's a long process. It's about 6 to 9 months per hip, and I did them separately because that's kind of just what the doctor at Ohio State said to do. Rehab wise would be my best bet. It's definitely a difficult process and it's long and you feel like you're moving so slow, but it's doable. And I know a lot of goalies get it done now, more than ever, I would imagine. But yeah, it's a tough process, but got through it and it made me honestly more hungry to come back and play. Like I had never taken a break from hockey probably since I was 5 years old. Like obviously in the summer you step away and you do other stuff, but I think, and not led by my parents at all, but by myself, my life was hockey. And I had to kind of at that point learn how to be Cassidy without hockey. And it was pretty cool actually.
Was it good also to see the game from a different perspective, like watching it on in the stands versus being on the team and like doing all that stuff? Like I feel like that must help as well.
Yeah, I actually because I got to go to all the games, which was nice. That was like a part of, because sometimes injured players don't travel, but I was lucky enough to be able to go to every weekend. Um, I actually like made a note on my phone with players that I knew were going to be returning and like their tendencies. So that's not something you could do when you're playing in the game. Like, sure, you might remember so and so is good at driving low or something, but when you're actually sitting in the stands or in like a skybox, you have an opportunity to like sit back and actually see their tendencies. So
What were some of the tendencies? Do you still remember any of them for any of the players?
yeah, there's Sarah Nurse. She would always like come in and she would always shoot high. She's good at picking corners. So kind of knowing that tendency. She's also good at playing below the goal line. That was one that I like mastered because I just didn't want to get scored on by her when we were playing against Wisconsin. So
That's awesome. And obviously any PWHPA players that are listening to the goalies that are listening to this might have a little secret on how to save certain shots. But did
yeah,
you
I
also
might still
use
have my list if they want it.
did you do it for any of your teammates as well? Like did you tell them like, hey, this is what you do, maybe try to work on this a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, and I also like would be, not to like crap on any other goalies, but everyone kind of has their weak spot. I mean, there's always something that a goalie feels less confident with, and I would like watch goalies to a point where I would figure out what their weakness was, and I would share that with my teammates and try and use that to get goals against other teams so that we could have more success.
Now, how do you like what's the recovery? I guess I'm curious because my favorite goalie is Tuukka Rask, and he
Yeah.
had labrum surgery and unfortunately he had to retire because of it. So I'm curious like how you like get back on the ice with the after a labrum surgery and how you sort of like get back to like what you were before the surgery, like healthy versus like not letting it like ruin your career, I guess.
Yeah, I honestly think I had no expectations. I think that helped me a lot because I didn't honestly think I was going to be able to compete at the same level. I sort of saw myself as a liability in that sense because you just don't know. It's not like I had ever done it before, so you don't really know what you're putting yourself into. But I think having like low expectations on what I was able to do after surgery was actually like a pretty good approach. Because then every time like, you step on the ice with just skates the first time, and you're like, oh wow, I can skate, that's good. And then you go with like just your pads on, and you can go in a butterfly, and it feels somewhat normal. So I think just like meeting those milestones without kind of having expectations that are unrealistic was how I did it.
Now, in your first 2 years with Ohio State, your team really struggled a lot. You guys finished below 500 for those seasons. I'm curious, what was it like being a part of a program during the beginning part of a rebuilding process? And what role did you play in trying to improve Ohio State to what it is today?
Like I said a while ago, I think we ended up getting some really skilled players in, kind of during my time there, and we had some very good players when I was there as a freshman and sophomore as well. And I think it was just a matter of like it clicking. Um, I think sometimes it just takes like a team going through that kind of stuff and being below 500 and struggling to get to the top of the mountain. And I think it was cool to be a part of that. I knew going into Ohio State that we weren't going to be winning a national championship my freshman year. But it was still a goal of mine when I was a freshman. It was still a goal of mine when I was redshirting my sophomore year. So I think just having that mindset, and slowly we started to get players that had that winner's mentality.
And I think a big reason why Ohio State started to change was the hiring of Nadine Muzerall during your junior season. I'm curious, what's it like as a player going through a coaching transition, and what was it like playing under Coach Muzerall?
Yeah, no, it was really good. She's very demanding, but I think she gets a lot out of her players, and like I commend her for that because she will push people to the point of, where they're exhausted or they feel like they have nothing else to give, but she finds a little bit more out of everyone. And she did that with myself. It was a good experience, and I do genuinely appreciate how much she pushed us. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I think when we got to that point, our team realized like everyone would look at themselves in the mirror and know that they gave it their all. So
And obviously, one interview I was listening to about Coach Muzerall is someone said like she wasn't your best friend when you were with the team at all. Like you grew to sort of hate her a little bit, but then after your career with Ohio State, you realize how much she meant to you, and now like they talk all the time. Is that the same thing for yourself?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I wouldn't say we were best friends at all, but I think she does genuinely love and respect her players. And she has a way of getting a lot out of people, and I think that's shown in the success that the team has had in the past couple of years, especially. Like, she came in there and she's a trailblazer, and she's going to keep doing what she needs to do to have success. So
Another question I want to ask you as well, because you went from a male coach to a female coach, is that different as well?
yeah, it was different. I honestly didn't notice it too much. Matt is a really good coach as well, and I learned a lot from him in just 1 year at Clarkson. So but I honestly didn't notice that much of a difference.
Now, obviously, your senior year, your team drastically improved, winning over 20 games and making the Frozen Four. I'm curious, what did your team do during that offseason to make such a big improvement to the success that your team had? Obviously, you talk about the players that you added on your team. And looking at that team was it's pretty unbelievable to see like the talent that you guys had with Emma Malte, Tatum Skaggs, Lauren Boyle, yourself, Madison Field. It's actually pretty unbelievable to see all the talent that
Yeah.
your team had. So I'm curious like what your team did to sort of build that chemistry and have that success for your senior year.
Yeah, I think that was if I'm not mistaken, that was the first summer. Like most of us would stay in the summer to train and stuff, but I think that was the first summer that I would say 90% of the team like voluntarily chose to stay on campus, take classes, reduce the academic load, and just train. And it was really great. We got a lot done, and it's different when you're all doing the same thing in the summer. You're all on the same page and you're working together, and there's no pressure of games and stuff, and you just have an opportunity to like build that culture um, without kind of the same environment that you have during the academic year.
Now, at what point during the season did you realize like this team was capable of making the Frozen Four?
I think it was a home weekend when we played against Wisconsin, and we actually swept them. I think that was the first time in program history that Ohio State swept Wisconsin, or it had been a very long time. And I think that's kind of when we looked at each other and we were like, "Dang, we're good!" Like when we do all the little things right, like this team can have a huge success. So
And obviously, I want to ask you one question before I get into the WCHA playoffs that season. One is your rink in Ohio State is very unique. It's really small, but I like how you guys can pack it every single night. I'm curious, what's it like as a goalie playing in that small rink at Ohio State?
yeah, that's my favorite rink. I think it always will be. There's just something different about it. It's not flashy. It's not, like, yeah, Wisconsin's rink is nice, Minnesota's rink is nice, but it just felt like home. And I think it was really cool to see throughout the years. We would go from having like 30 people in the stands, and now you look at it and there's not an inch of space. So it was pretty cool to see that transition over the years where so many people started to come and watch the team.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite road rink to play in college, I
Uh,
should say?
hmm, trying to think. I do like Wisconsin. I mean, it's a nice bright rink, and it's a little bit of a change up. But yeah, I like Wisconsin. I'm trying to think if there's any out of conference rinks that I really liked, but I think that would probably be my favorite.
I might be a little biased because I'm from the East Coast, but I feel like the ECAC has cooler rinks than the
Yeah,
WCHA.
yeah, there's a lot of nice ECAC rinks for sure.
But still Wisconsin better than Hobie Baker, Lina, all those.
Yeah,
Oh wow. What's the best chirp you've heard in a road rink? Because I know as a goal you sometimes get heckled from the fans. Is there any good ones that
yeah,
you've heard?
yeah. Minnesota sucks. Like they are cruel. They would say like Sauve is a great big sieve, dude. And that one actually hurts. Like they're
Wow.
yelling at you the whole game. It sucks. I'm like, can you guys just pipe down for a second? Let me focus on stopping the puck.
Yeah. Honestly, maybe it's because the Bostonian me that wouldn't be bother me at all because I just feel like that's sort of a lame chant. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, yeah. I
I
had at Bemidji once. I had a bag of popcorn thrown at my head when we were getting off the ice. That was pretty good. It wasn't a chirp, but it was, you know.
Did you get to eat any of it afterwards?
No, I like fell where I couldn't reach it.
Oh,
Otherwise, I would have. But yeah,
that's yeah. That's I will say though, my favorite chant is probably like there's one at UMass where like after they score a goal, they're like, it's all your fault. They start chanting at the goalie.
yeah,
And that I like that because it's like making fun of the
yeah,
goalie a little bit.
yeah. Penn State does that too. I've heard I haven't played at Penn State since they had like kind of have grown their fan base, but heard they're pretty savage. So
Is Ohio State savage, especially since you have the small rank, that must help a little bit.
yeah, the fan section, like they bang the glass a lot, but only I guess only one period that the goalie has to deal with it. So
Okay, okay. Well, that's interesting to know that sometimes those chants can hurt the goalies. So shout out to Minnesota fans for doing that. I will say
yeah,
that I've heard that locker room's the worst in the WCHA.
the Gophers.
The Ritter Arena, yeah.
Oh, the visiting one or the
Yeah,
home one?
the visiting one.
Yeah, I don't actually remember it all that much. I don't know if we were in a different room for the Frozen Four, but the Frozen Four room was nice.
Yeah. I said if someone said it was like really small, that was the problem.
Yeah, there's a couple small ones. I heard Ohio State. visitor locker room sucks.
Well, that makes sense a little bit because the arena's so small.
Yeah,
So I would be shocked if it was like anything nice, but it's
yeah,
the visiting locker room, so you can't like
yeah,
it's like you're only there for like one game
yeah.
basically.
You got to disadvantage the other team a little bit.
Exactly, exactly. Now, obviously, speaking of Minnesota, the WCHA championship or playoffs that year, your team lost to Minnesota before heading off to the national tournament. So I'm curious, what was the message heading into the tournament, and what was your reaction heading into the tournament, and how'd you use that loss to make that run to the Frozen Four?
Yeah, so I actually didn't even dress for that game. I tore my MCL. So I was a yeah, it was tough to kind of sit back and watch. My goalie partner at the time, Amanda Zeglin, actually like played lights out, and she was awesome. She, like they really gave it to us that game, and she stood on her head. And I don't think it really affected us that much. It was almost more of like you kind of need one of those things to happen, because we had been on a pretty good run. And then afterwards, like it didn't even really feel like we lost a game when we got to the airport and we started watching the viewing party. And there was like a bunch of cameras and stuff. It was pretty cool. And when we were selected to the tournament, it was like we kind of forgot about the game immediately. Like, I honestly haven't thought about that game since you just brought it up. So
I
it definitely
apologize for
didn't
that.
stick with us. No, that's okay.
You played in the tournament though, right? I remember that.
Yeah, yeah, I did. So I played against BC and then in the Frozen Four with a torn MCL.
Oh, how did you manage that?
It wasn't great. It was not ideal, but got through it.
What's the worst to play through, a torn labrum or a torn MCL?
I would say MCL. Yeah, like labrum is doable unless you kick your leg out, but MCL every time you go down, it's
So
disastrous.
I'm assuming the recovery time's not as like long because you didn't miss any of your fifth year.
No, no, it heals itself, which is great. Like you don't have to get surgery if it's just your MCL. So it was, I mean, it sucked and it took a little bit after the season for it to heal, but not not any longer than I would have been off if I was just kind of
Yeah.
taking a break after the season.
Now let's talk about that game against Boston College when you beat them in the first round to head to the Frozen Four. What do you remember from that game? Because from what I remember from that game is I had the chance to interview Lauren Boyle like 2 years ago. This is like one of the first episodes I ever did. And she said there was a coach at BC that didn't want her on the team and said some stuff about her during the recruitment process. And she remembers when she scored that goal against BC. It was like one of the best moments of her career because she got to prove that coach
Yeah.
wrong. So that's what I remember from it. But what do you remember from that big win?
I honestly, that whole day is such a blur. Um, the only thing I remember is after the game being in so much pain because of my knee, and then going upstairs and like just hugging my mom and dad. I remember one save I made in the game. I stuck my leg. I pretty much landed in the splits, which I can't do. So it's kind of shocking, but I like made a toe save and that's all I remember. And then I remember just hugging my mom and dad and that's it. And the excitement, but like absolute exhaustion in our locker room. Like people did whatever they could. There was so many block shots. There was like so much effort from our team. I think people were honestly too tired to be like super pumped up. But obviously, once the emotions kind of leveled out, we were like, wow, we're going to the Frozen Four. But I think people were genuinely exhausted and just pretty quiet. Like I was pretty quiet after the game.
Yeah, people forget that was sort of a big upset because you guys had to go on the road to play that game. And I'm pretty sure BC was like undefeated the previous year and they lost in the
Yeah,
championship game. So that BC team was pretty solid because I'm pretty sure they had like Megan
yeah,
Keller and all those top end players.
yeah, yeah. They were really good. I mean, their goalie played really well too. It was honestly a really good game. It was just like high emotion because we had never been there before. We didn't, like the worst case scenario for us was that we went further than we went the year before. For them, it was obviously more of an upset. They were seated higher than us, and we kind of just went. I think when we went into it, there was less of like there's no pressure on the underdog. We just went in and had fun with it.
Yeah, I feel like that naiveness probably helped out a little bit because you guys were, it was all new to you. For them, it was like them trying to like, I guess like that experience maybe added more pressure than it normally
Yeah,
would have been.
yeah, for sure.
Now, what was your Frozen Four experience like in Minnesota? Off the ice, red carpet, all that stuff. That must have been fun to experience for the first time.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely get treated like a celebrity, which is pretty cool. I think in women's hockey, you don't necessarily get that exposure like that until you get to that stage, and it was really cool. It was honestly overwhelming. I remember walking down the red carpet, and I'm like, "Wow, we're about to play a hockey game. Like, this is wild. There's so many people." It's a really cool experience, though, and I think the NCAA does a good job, um, giving us that opportunity, putting it at good venues. But yeah, it was really cool. I think it was a little overwhelming for most of our team. None of us had ever been there, but it was a great experience.
Who had the best outfit at the red carpet for Ohio State? I know you're a big hat person based on your IG, so I'm assuming you had
Yeah.
something good, but any other of your teammates had something good?
Um, Gosh, I feel like everyone had such good style. I would have to say probably like Danny Sadek or Lauren Boyle, Tatum Skaggs. Those girls, I feel like all wear leather. So like I feel like anything leather looks good, right?
Exactly, exactly. We'll talk a little bit about that game against Clarkson. Obviously, you guys lost in overtime, so I'm curious what emotions you were feeling after that game because I feel like you never want to be the goalie in the highlight reel for like a big moment. And I do have a couple questions
Yeah.
to ask you after that game because I'm assuming there were some things I'm curious about that. But just talk about that game from your perspective and what you sort of felt, how you, when you think back to it today, like what do you sort of remember from it?
Yeah, that one still hurts. We had actually scored a goal. We have this like because we scored and it got called off, so we have this like joke around it, saying it was political. Um, when you score a goal and it gets called off in a situation like that, and then not too long after they come down and score like a highlight reel goal, it's definitely tough to take in. I remember laying on the ice with, I think it was me, Lauren Boyle. There's actually a picture of it, but like we were so upset that we literally couldn't stand up. And I think that just like goes to show you how much everyone genuinely cares about each other too. Because we weren't like at the end of the day, losing happens, and every team in the NCAA season usually ends on a loss, with the exception of the team that wins the tournament. And I think just how hard we had worked to get to that moment and how much confidence we had going into that game and believing in ourselves and knowing that we were just as good as the other teams there. It was definitely tough, just like a tough moment for us. And for, especially our seniors, which was my class, like that was their last game. So,
Yeah, I remember there was a photo of Danny Sadek like absolutely bawling on the ice after that game, and I feel like that just shows you
yeah,
the passion that your team had to make it
yeah,
that far, and just what you've done to the program. Because that moment, I really feel like is a huge pivotal reason why Ohio State won a national championship this past
yeah.
season, and I think it's just really cool to see how fast the program's developed in such a short period of time. Because most programs take like 10, 15 years to sort of get to the powerhouse that they are, but Ohio State it only took like 5 years, which is pretty unbelievable. And I think it's all because of the great players that Mazeral and the previous coach recruited there.
Yeah, for sure. No, I definitely agree with that.
Now, you did transfer to Clarkson the following season, so I want to ask you what led you to sort of go to another school for your fifth year.
I think at that point, I was thinking like on the academic side of things. So I was done my undergrad at Ohio State, and Clarkson. I had a 1 year MBA program. There was a couple other schools that had kind of like master's programs that intrigued me. So I started to shop around a little bit and just like ultimately at that point decided for someone like myself, a female athlete, at the end of the day, our education actually does really matter. And that's a huge reason why we go to the NCAA to play hockey. And I wanted to further my education, and I didn't want to have to like do a 2 year program and sit at a school after my eligibility had expired. So I found a couple 1 year programs and talked to the coaches, and ultimately it was just like, this is the best decision for my life moving forward. And yeah, I chose Clarkson, obviously a very successful team as well. I do think in the season that I was at Clarkson, I faced a lot of shots, and it was kind of going back to a team where I got peppered a little bit, but they were a really good team and a good group. So worked out in the end.
I do have to ask you how awkward it was going in the locker room for the first time after they just eliminated your team the previous season that year.
No, they were pretty good about it. I mean, I think they were excited to have me, which is very humbling. And after they had just graduated Shay Tiley, I knew I had big shoes to fill, so I was ready for the opportunity, and I was excited to be in the room with them. And I think that they felt the same way, so it wasn't too bad.
Another question I want to ask you is I'm assuming Clarkson has a hype video before each game, probably showing some of the national championship footage and maybe the overtime goal. How awkward was that having to watch that before
You
each
know what?
game?
They actually cut it out. They cut it out of the video for me. Um, the only time I actually saw the video of that goal was at their ring ceremony, that we like went to the following year. So, um, and I was like, yeah, it was a pretty gross goal. Like at least it wasn't a muffin. I
Yeah.
think I'd have a harder time with it if it was like a really bad goal, but it was honestly gross. So it's okay, I guess now.
Yeah, definitely. Is it weird joining a team that just wins a national championship? Because all of them like have that experience, but I don't know. I feel like there's probably some like maybe not awkwardness might not be the right word, but just sort of like interesting to sort of go to a room like that where they know how to win versus like someone like yourself who hasn't done it at that moment.
Yeah, I think it's cool to go into a culture that knows how to win. I think I also left a culture that was learning it, so it was pretty cool. Like, and I didn't notice it that much transition wise. And I ended up going to Clarkson for the summer as well to take some classes, just so that my load during the school year would be a little bit less. So I ended up meeting most of the girls in the summer. So I think that kind of eased the transition as well, because again, when summer school is a little bit different than when you're jumping right into it with training camp and whatnot.
Now, you won the ECAC championship that year. Describe the emotions of winning that championship and what it meant to you, because I think the ECAC is the best conference in women's hockey because there's like 7, 8 teams that have a legit chance to go to the tournament every year, which is pretty unbelievable. So, what was it like winning that championship and being all those high-end schools and players?
Yeah, that was great. I remember like we went into that tournament, we were kind of underdogs, I would say. I think we were like third or something in the rankings for that. So we ended up, our first game ended up being delayed like an hour. So we were sitting in our equipment for an hour, right? Because the other game had like double overtime or something. And I feel like when you're just sitting there for so long like that, you're just like the anxiety starts to build up, you get nervous. But we actually ended up coming out and playing really well. And I think as a team, we just performed so well that weekend, that we ended up having a lot of success and led us into a very good kind of opportunity. So,
What's the main differences between the ECAC and the WCHA playing style wise from your perspective as a goalie?
uh, I would say that the WCHA is a lot more physical. I think there's like a tendency for whatever reason, especially when I was playing the WCHA, there's like bigger bodies, and it seems like people are like, I don't know, built different. And then the ECAC, I think there's like a lot more finesse, crafty players, small players, like high hockey IQ. So I think that was the big difference. And it was also really different playing against so many teams that were like in your conference, and like versus like having to play out of conference games and whatnot. There's so many teams. So
It also must be weird because like in the ECAC you play 2 different teams a week every weekend versus the WCHA where you play the same team every weekend. Is that like
yeah.
different preparing? Like it must be like as a goal you have to prepare. You usually have like a routine of like how you prepare for a weekend. Does that change it at all playing 2 different teams versus the same one?
Yeah, a little bit. I think when you're playing the same team twice in a row, it can either be really good or really bad. Like if your team comes out and pumps a team on Friday, then you go into it being like, oh, this is going to be easy on Saturday. Whereas if you're playing two different teams, you have a different approach for both teams. But then on the other end of it, like if you have a tough game on a Friday against a team, and then you want your revenge on Saturday. So I think kind of both of them have their benefit. And obviously being in the PHF now, you play the same team twice in a weekend. So I don't mind being back at that. It's definitely not traditional, I would say, but I don't mind it.
Now, there's a reason why Boston College has nightmares because of you, and it's because Clarkson beat BC again in the tournament to head to the Frozen Four that season. What was the difference between Boston College when you were beating them in Clarkson versus when you were with Ohio State? And just talk about the overtime goal that was scored that led you to the Frozen Four with Clarkson that year.
Yeah, I actually don't remember that game at all. Like, I don't know what it is with BC. Like,
They
I
remember the
mean,
games, but
yeah, I do genuinely like playing against them, I guess. And but yeah, I feel like I was very overwhelmed first of all because we were playing them again, and I'm like, oh God, like they're gonna want vengeance, even though I'm on a different team. And I think again, like the team in front of me just played so well that it was like, people sacrificing their bodies again. And when you have Gable and Jaguar, you're almost guaranteed to get a goal. So kind of just my job's to just keep the team in the game and let them do their thing. And I think as a whole, we did a good job doing that and preparing for the game. So
yeah, I was just thinking about you. I've had some really good defenses around you for both Ohio State Clarkson. I
yeah,
think it's like crazy that you had like Jinsey Dunn with in front of you in Ohio State, and then the following year you have L. Shelton in front of you
yeah,
defensively. Like that's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. They're both great, and I was definitely blessed with very good defensemen over the years, which is really a goalie's best friend, I think. So
Absolutely, especially since like those pesky players try to dig into your pads a little bit after
yeah,
this, so you need someone to like shove them off a little bit.
yeah, for sure.
Now, what was it like up in the Frozen Four with Clarkson? Was the experience a little bit different than the one with Ohio State? And just talk about off the ice. I'm curious because I like the one in Quinnipiac just because looking at it, this might sound so stupid, but looking at it, it just looks better in that rink versus the one in Minnesota. Maybe I'm a bit biased on that. I just think it looks cool with the blue
Yeah.
seats and all that stuff. I'm curious what your experience was like at that Frozen Four in a different venue.
It was cool to be in a situation where it wasn't my first time. I think that was kind of nice, and obviously the only people on our team that would have been experiencing that for the first time at that point would be the freshmen. So I think it was really cool, and I did like the venue a lot. I'm honestly not a huge fan of the Quinnipiac rink. It's too bright.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, like I think it's a beautiful rink to look at. For whatever, like the lighting in there is just like it's so bright that it's almost hard to see.
hmm
Um, but yeah, it's a great rink, and again, we got treated really well, and it was another great experience. It was definitely a tougher tournament, I would say, just in terms of how things went, but overall, it was another great experience.
And you played Wisconsin in your final game of your collegiate career. Talk about that game. Obviously, it didn't go the way you wanted to, losing 5-0, but I feel like there's no shame in losing to the champions of that year.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Definitely a tough one. I think probably up until like 6 months ago, it was like still something I regularly thought about. I don't know why that, maybe because it was my last game in college, and I think college was such a good experience for me that it stung a little bit more to end that way. Um, but I did have one coach that when I was at Clarkson, she said that um, like that's not, it doesn't encompass everything. The success that we've all had, and everything we've accomplished over, whether it was for the seniors that were in my class, their 4 years at Clarkson, or my 4 years at Ohio State and then Clarkson. It doesn't kind of tell the whole story. And while it sucks, at the end of the day, like I said before, everyone kind of has to lose except for the team that wins it all. So
hmm
it's tough, but I'd rather lose to the team that wins it all than not.
Yeah, and both times that happened, which is
Yeah,
pretty crazy to think about.
yeah, for sure.
Now, how has your college hockey experience helped you as a professional hockey player today?
I think just the volume and like the ability to compete at such a high level consistently, I think it sets you up for success. And obviously, I've had bumps in the road with injuries and whatnot, but I do think it prepares you, and kind of having to balance that academic and athletic lifestyle. with also like having a social life, I think it prepares you for kind of the future. And at the end of the day, you have a degree to fall back on. I'm incredibly lucky at this point to be still playing hockey and to be playing professional hockey. But I know that I have 2 degrees to go get a real job, as some people would say one day. So
Just continue to play hockey as long as you can, Cassidy, because
that's the plan.
that's how I always feel. It's like the real world isn't as fun as people try to make it out to be. So just
Yeah,
continue to delay it as long as you can.
yeah, for sure. I don't know how many people actually like love their day job, So
Exactly, exactly. Now, one thing I pride myself about College Hockey Talk is we ask the questions that people might not ask. And there was a viral video when Ohio State made the Frozen Four against Clarkson
yeah.
when Danny Sadek like shoved one of the Clarkson defenders in front of you.
Yeah.
It was a pretty funny video. Since we're probably never gonna ever get Danny Sadek on the podcast, I'm curious what's the story behind that video, if there is any.
Well, so Danny and I are best friends. So at that time when those 2 girls skated in to try and get the puck from me, which was it was covered, she just like I don't know, she just was like it was like a protection thing. She just dummied both of them, and it was so funny. And honestly, after losing the game and being so upset, we were sitting on the bus. We must have been getting ready to go back to the airport, and we saw that online, and we were like, you know what? Honestly, it's worth it. Like, it was so great. Like, I don't know. It was so viral. It was so funny. But yeah, she was protecting me. So I think it was a great play by her. And I would definitely watch it over and over again if I could. So
Did you ever ask Cassie Winkle about it the following year, or you tried to stay away from it, I guess, a little bit?
no, I asked her and she said she wasn't even crashing the net. And I was like, no, you were. You skated right into her like fist. So she like power punched both of you.
I
So
feel like I would much rather be on Danny's part where like I'm shoving someone than getting fallen over. But at least Cassie is like laughs about it right now, which is I feel like it's a
yeah.
good sport to have.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, for sure. That team had so many underrated players. Like Danny was one of them. Like I feel like no
Yeah.
one talks about how good she was, and she was a big reason
Yeah.
why Ohio State had that success. Same with that entire defense, like Charlie Dahlquist. Like there's so many
Yeah.
players I can just name off that team that I just enjoyed watching. And yeah, no, that was a fun team for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Danny's like honestly one of my favorite hockey players I've ever played with because I watched her as a freshman and I was like, I don't know if this girl's going to be good. And then she just like bloomed and
hmm
like good hockey IQ, very skilled, can shoot the puck. So it was cool to watch her grow throughout her years there.
So we're now in a segment I like to call the non-hockey segment, where I ask you some non-hockey questions just so people get
Yeah.
to know you a little bit more. First one is you're obviously known as a hat person, so what's your favorite hat that you own?
Um, I honestly like my toques, or as Americans would call them, beanies. I don't know if I have a favorite. I try and rotate so that I'm
hmm
not wearing the same one, especially in back-to-back Instagram posts because that's not it. But yeah, I this is my Buttes one, so it's a pretty good one.
Nice. Do you try to wear like a scally cap at some point? I feel like that would be cool seeing you rock that.
No, I don't know. Maybe one day.
I'll tell you, Cassie, that would break the internet if you try to do like a Peaky Blinders look before a Buttes game. I think that
Okay.
would be awesome. So just a suggestion, and if it does
Okay.
happen, I need the Buttes social medias sort of shout me out in some sort of way. I don't know how they will, but they need to.
Okay. I'll get them to tag you.
Awesome, awesome. Now, what is your favorite TV show, and which character on that show would be the best hockey player?
Um, okay, I'm gonna go with The Office. And I'm gonna pick Michael Scott. Not because I think he would be a good hockey player, but because I think he would really lighten the mood in the locker room.
Oh, for sure. And obviously, you drilled Toby in that one episode, so at least he would be
Yeah,
a good nail gun player,
and
which
we
would be
we know he
important.
can skate a little bit at least. So
I think Jim would probably be the best just because he's probably in the best shape out of all the characters.
yeah,
But I don't know if like he would actually play or not. So that's the thing. We haven't seen that.
yeah, yeah, true.
What music do you like to listen to that pumps you up before a game?
Um, Super weird, but I like really soft music, chill music before a game. Anything that gets like me too elevated actually makes me nervous. So I usually listen to like Noah Kahan or Dermot Kennedy, like very like sad girl music. So
Is that what you listen to all the time or just before a game?
um like probably like 80% of the time, but if I'm like randomly feeling like listening to like other genres, I will. Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to everything, but I think for me, I need to get hyped up before a game. I need to be fired up. Like I want to be like want to run through a wall before each game. So I'm the complete
Yeah,
opposite
definitely not
of you.
me. I like to be calm, cool, collected, you know?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense as a goalie, but I don't know. I feel like as a goalie, maybe I don't know. I played goalie a little bit, and like I would still want to be fired up before a game. So maybe that's why I
Yeah,
probably wouldn't have made it as a goalie.
fair.
Now, let's talk about some of your teammates that you had. First one is with Clarkson. Who was the funniest teammate you had on that team?
Uh, hmm. I'm gonna have to go with Christy Pigeon. Um, she wasn't even like, I don't think purposely trying to be funny. She just was like, she was a very like light and bubbly person. So she just kind of elevated the mood and she was fun to be around.
Funniest teammate you had with Ohio State.
I would say Danny. Um, some of the stuff I like made a list of like things that Danny would do because they would just blow my mind sometimes. It was just her personality. She's very like again, she's very like bubbly and easygoing. So she was just very fun to be around and always made me laugh. So
That's awesome. Best style on Clarkson when you were there. Pre-game, I mean.
uh best style. I would honestly have to say Michaela Boyle. She was there for my first half. Like she always had really good outfits.
Who had the best style on the team at Ohio State? I know you sort of mentioned the Frozen Four ones, but is there was someone that always stood out every weekend, or was it just
I'm
always
gonna,
Tatum
yeah,
Skaggs?
I'm gonna have to go with like Emma Malte or Liv Halverson. I feel like they always had like the absolute most wild outfits. I mean, Emma's obviously still there, so if you really want to just go about her outfits, they're like she definitely has something creative every game. So I'll give
Did
her
you get her
that.
into the hat game? Because I feel like she pulls that off every weekend.
No, but she does wear a lot of hats. I noticed that. I liked it.
That's good. That's good. I think she does a good job with the sort of old school top hat, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. I don't know what
yeah,
it's
it suits
called.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what is the most interesting thing you've seen or read this week?
Um, I'm trying to think. I've been really following that Idaho case. And I really want to know what happened because it's been bothering me. So I would say that. I really do hope they figure it out. But like TikTok is going crazy. I feel like there's a bunch of detectives on TikTok that need to be hired because they are figuring things out that the police probably haven't even touched on yet. So
That will definitely be a Netflix documentary in like 2 years. I can guarantee
100%.
you
Yeah.
that. My
Yeah.
most interesting thing I've seen is a little bit not as serious as that one. I'm a big Red Sox fan, and I'm really disappointed that Xander Bogaerts signed with the Padres for 11 years, $280
Uh,
million. It's a whole thing. Like I love the Red Sox, but I feel like they have all these good players sometimes, and they feel like they never find a way to keep them, whether it's Mookie
yeah.
Betts or John Lester, and now Xander Bogaerts, and now I'm worried about Rafael Devers. So
That's
I'm
fair.
hoping. So I've been like reading all about that, and it was a great night because the Bruins won, the Celtics won, and then the Red Sox just lose Xander Bogaerts and it just killed my whole mood for the entire night after that.
That's fair. I'm sorry for your loss. That's sucky.
Yeah, I know it is what it is. I know most people aren't into baseball, but that's sort of my
No,
after
I
hockey,
actually
that's like my thing. Like after
That's
hockey, I love
fair. I
baseball.
actually went to a baseball game at Fenway this summer and it was pretty cool. So
Who was it against?
the Yankees, I think.
Oh, that's cool. I've never been to a Sox Yankees game before. I've always
Yeah, it
wanted
was
to
cool.
go.
Yeah.
I assume like you probably are like a Blue Jays fan, and I was like, if you went to that 29 run Blue Jays game at Fenway, that would have been that would have been fun for you, but for me, I don't like
Yeah.
to think about
No,
that
it was,
game.
and it was so close. Like the game, I think that game was like 2 days before I went to Boston. So that would have been cool. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, final non-hockey question is if you could have lunch with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Um, I would probably have lunch with Dermot Kennedy. I would just want to like pick his brain on his music. Um, and also like probably fangirl a little bit and tell him that I listen to his music before every game. So yeah,
Hmm.
I would definitely consider having lunch with him. That'd be pretty cool.
I think for me, probably Wayne Gretzky. Just seems like
Fair.
I feel like his opinion on hockey would be super interesting to hear, and I'd love to hear
Yeah.
how he just like dominated everyone. Like back in juniors, like
Yeah.
what was it like getting like 150 points in like 50 games? Like that seems pretty
Yeah.
cool to me. Like, and
Yeah.
he'd probably be
Fair.
humble about it, but I would love to know what it was like.
Yeah. No, definitely. He would be a good one. I think. I went off the hockey route, but I would probably just get lunch with Charlene Labonte if it was a hockey thing, just because I already know her and feel
Yeah.
like we could use a catch up, you know?
I think if I had to pick anyone non-hockey, man, you put me on the spot. I put myself on the spot here a little bit. Probably like I don't know. Probably like Abraham Lincoln. Like I think it'd be interesting to hear like him as a
Yeah,
president. Like even though he
true.
would like think what I'm saying is crazy because I'm like
Yeah,
200 years younger than he is. So
yeah, true.
now getting back to some hockey questions now. First one I want to ask you is what advice would you give younger players that are trying to pursue a career in college hockey?
I would say honestly, like the biggest thing is be a multi-sport athlete. Um, don't I don't think we were actually talking about this with my roommates the other day, but specializing in hockey at a young age is like not it's not it. I played a bunch of different sports growing up, and I think kind of just being involved in different teams and learning different skills actually benefits you in the long run. And just have fun. Like I feel like not enough kids nowadays just have fun.
Hmm.
I feel like it's so serious. Like they're playing in tournaments all summer. It's supposed to be a game, right? And I think I was very fortunate growing up to have parents that made sure it stayed just a game, and never let it get too serious until it actually was kind of more serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is like if you want to play college hockey, you have to be good academically. So focusing in on those academics and um, kind of you don't have to know what you're going to do. I mean, I switched my major a couple of times when I was in college, but make sure that when you're in high school, you're doing whatever you can to have academic success so that it crosses over into your collegiate career.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you about the burnout thing. I feel like what made me love hockey the way I love it now is because I played other sports growing up, and I feel like a lot of times kids today
Yeah,
they get just so burnt out because they're playing hockey from January to December, and you sort
yeah,
of need that break to sort of readjust your mind a little bit, but also like I guess like not like just to take a break from it as well because then it'll just make you love the sport more and sort of like
yeah.
make you appreciate it more, I guess, as well.
Yeah. I'm usually someone to this day that will take at least like a month or two off my skates in the summer.
Hmm.
And I play soccer with my sister-in-law. Like I still try and get away from hockey because it is a job now and you need your vacation days. So
Exactly. Well, do you have before we end this interview, I was curious, do you have any like shout outs you want to give to your teammates, former teammates, friends, family members? Feel free to give them a shout out.
I mean, I've mentioned Danny Sadik enough, so I guess I'll give her a hello. You know what? I genuinely appreciated all my teammates through all 5 years that I was in the NCAA, and I've made lifelong friendships through that. So I'm incredibly grateful for all of them. And then I mean, in terms of my family, they're my biggest supporters. My mom, my dad, my brother, and then his fiance and my two nieces. So, and of course, my grandma, I can't leave her out. She's like my best friend. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Cassidy, for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. You know, it's a good episode when you go beyond 40 minutes. So I really appreciate this conversation. And
Yeah, of
I wish
course.
you nothing but the best for the rest of your season with the Buttes. I know you're going to do great, but thank you for your time. It means a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, one question I want to ask you before I end this thing is just what can I do better to improve